jobs, jobs, and jobs. We all know someone that has either lost a job or has lost hours at work or is worried about losing their job or has a relative that's worried about losing their job. There's a tremendous amount of anxiety. I'm 46 years old. I don't remember a time in my life where I had more contemporaries that were in trouble financially, in trouble economically because they either lost a job, were worried about losing a job, or they can't quite make ends meet. And that is what is on everybody's mind this election season. As we know, there are a lot of issues facing our country. We're involved in 2 wars. We have an energy policy, which is a self-destructive energy policy. But the overriding issue for most folks, when they, as my father would say, answer the bell in the morning, is are they going to be able to pay the bills? They're going to be able to sit down at the dinner table with their children and not worry about can they pay for school, can they pay the mortgage, can they pay the energy bill at the end of the month. That's really for most of us the reason we get up in the morning, right? To take care of our family. And if you think you can't do that, there isn't any greater fear or any greater anxiety. So if you're going to go to Congress, which I hope to do after the November election, right now the #1 thing on your mind ought to be how do we remove that anxiety by getting this economy going. And the way I have ideas on it, but you know, I don't have a PhD in economics. The fact that I stood up and decided to run for Congress doesn't mean that I have all the answers on how to fix our economy. I have some ideas. I have some things that I'd like to push for the middle class and for working people that I think will help, as I said, take that pressure off of the families in the 2nd Congressional District and get this economy going again. But I know that you have ideas as well. I know that there's no monopoly on opinions or thoughts about how to move this economy forward, and that's why I'm having these town halls. And I want you to know that if I become a congressman, it won't be the end of me asking for your opinion. I've learned as a state legislator, as a prosecutor, and when I was a rifle platoon leader in the 82nd Airborne Division, to seek the opinions of the people that I'm working with and for. And if I go to Congress, I'm going to be working for you. So I'm going to ask for your opinions. I'm going to ask for your ideas on any number of policy areas. But today, I asked you to come here today to talk about the economy. Now, I think there are a couple quick things we can and should do as a country to get this economy going again. There seems to be broad agreement that small business is the engine of the economy, and that small business is going to lead the recovery and drive drive down unemployment. But there isn't broad agreement on what the best way to help small business. Well, that's a perfect example, I think, of when we got to get the leaders of the country in a room and say, let's agree on 5 things we can do, and let's do them. Because if you're here in Conshohocken and you're looking down to Washington, you say, okay, one side says extend the Bush tax cuts. The other side says don't extend the Bush tax cuts. One side says create a loan program for small businesses. The other side says do something different. They all have ideas. Well, argue, debate, but eventually reach a verdict and do something. Now, here's what I think we should do. I think we ought to, #1, create a demand for products, which will create a demand for jobs, right? If you talk to small businesses, they're not hiring people because they're Uncle Scrooge and they don't want to hire people. They typically are not hiring people because they don't have anything for those people to do, right? They don't have a demand for the products or the services that they're offering. So we got to create a demand for those products and services. I think one quick and easy way to do that is to give businesses the ability to write off capital investments. We hear a lot today about how there's trillions of dollars of capital being held by companies and businesses because they're anxious about the state of the economy. They don't know what next year is going to look like. So they figure, I better hold on to my money. I'm not going to invest it in new equipment. I'm not going to invest it in a new facility or a new factory. I'm going to hold on to it. Well, if you tell that company, large and small, that you can write off a substantial portion of what you invest in equipment, capital investment, capital needs, they're going to make that investment. And that investment creates a demand for those products and services we're talking about. If you order 10 Mack trucks, somebody's got to make them. And somebody's got to make every component part of them. If you build a new factory, you got to put construction workers. You got to order cement. You got to order steel. So I think a capital investment write-off is better than a tax credit for hiring people, because a tax credit for hiring people creates an incentive, but if they don't have anything for those people to do at the company, there's really no good in giving them a $5,000 write-off for hiring somebody to come sit in an empty store or sit in an empty factory. So I think the capital investment write-off is one way to go. Number two, we need to invest in our infrastructure. Now there's two reasons for that. One is, we need to do it. In Delaware County where I live, we have 597 bridges that are labeled as structurally deficient. Now, if you're not an engineer, structurally deficient is a fancy way of saying if you drive across it, it might fall down. That's a crisis. In a county, in the suburban of an area of a major city, where you have almost 600 bridges that are key to the transportation system, key to the delivery and transport of goods, that are structurally deficient and no plan to repair them, that's a crisis. We have a mass transit system that is essential to our economic engine. I go out every morning and I shake hands at train stations. We have train lines in this area. Right here, the train line in Conshohocken, they carry about 20,000, 30,000 people a day to and from work. Many of the stations along those lines are 100 years old, in crumbling condition. We need to, so we need to invest in our infrastructure. But investing in our infrastructure is another way to create jobs quickly by creating a demand for the kinds of products and services that will create jobs. If you require that the money that goes into infrastructure be used for the purchase of things here in America. So let's use an easy example, the train. If SEPTA buys new train cars, which they did recently with some of the money they got from the stimulus, and they order those train cars here in America, every component part of that train car is manufactured here in America. And every component part equals a job. Remember when the auto industry was going in the tank? And we all learned that there was a factory up the street that made windshield wipers, or there was a place just south of Delaware County that made a component part of a tail light, and we started to learn the food chain of the auto industry. Well, that was the negative side of it. When you saw an industry shutting down, the negative side of how that has a ripple effect down the line. You can have that on a positive side by investing in infrastructure and requiring that the steel, the concrete, the parts for the rail cars, whatever else it is going into our transportation infrastructure is purchased here in America. And that, again, has an immediate effect on creating jobs. We must pass, the Congress has to pass, some package on taxes, right? Because we know if we do nothing, the so-called Bush tax cuts are going to expire. And that means everybody's taxes are going up. The people that make more than $250,000, the middle class, people in the real estate business, everybody's taxes are going up if they do nothing. So doing nothing, I don't think, is an option. We should do something. And I think when we do something, we ought to close the loophole that encourages the export of jobs overseas. We ought to carve out small businesses to the extent we can, so that small businesses aren't impacted by a jump in their taxes during the next year. And if we extend them we should extend the tax cuts for the middle class. But if we can't agree on what to do for the people that make more than $250,000, and we extend it for them, then we ought to cut from the budget how much that costs this country. Because remember, when George Bush signed those tax cuts into law, there was a surplus. And the argument was, I'm going to give you back. We shouldn't keep your money. We took too much of it in taxes. We're going to give it back to the people. Well, what's happened since then? We got involved in 2 wars. We've had an economic downturn, and there's no longer surplus. There's a huge deficit. If we extend tax cuts for people that make more than $250,000, it's going to cost us about $115 billion a year. So anybody that wants us to extend it for people that make more than $250,000 ought to also tell us where we're going to cut $115 billion out of our budget.